OJ Simpson died today. And I have thoughts that aren't important enough for me to write a script. So today, April 10th, 2024, OJ Simpson died of prostate cancer at the age of 76. I'm assuming many people missed the press release that he had prostate cancer. It completely went over my head. And it feels like the end of an era. It feels weird. Because I want to be clear, OJ wasn't a good dude. OJ has a much bigger place in Black culture and Black history than it's the weirdest legendary figure to have any type of like relevance within the oeuvre of Black American culture of probably all of them. I made a joke on my timeline that OJ Simpson might have been the one time white people might have been right about a nigga. Like the story of him before and after his murder case, it's probably worthy of its own video if I ever just want to like give him a Mike Tyson type joint in terms of like a complicated figure that, you know, kind of gives us an image of Black culture or gives us an opportunity to analyze something about Black culture. Because OJ has a lot going on beneath the surface. So for those too young to like remember or just have any real understanding of why this obscure? Yeah, like, is he obscure? Anyway, to understand why this figure is relevant, OJ Simpson was a Hall of Fame professional football player, arguably the greatest running back to ever play the game. And then he went from that into a career in media. So think like Tiki Barber, Michael Strahan type situation. And he was having a relatively successful career in media. And then his wife mysteriously was murdered in 1990. I was in middle school, so this had to be like 94. And he was the immediate suspect, and his trial was the spectacle true crime event of the century. And it was also this like touchstone moment in race politics in America, and is probably the worst example of that type of situation. Like, no situation or person least deserved the sympathy and attention of Black Americans than OJ Simpson. But it was really, it's hard to call it. I was a child, you know, take everything with a grain of salt. I was 11, 12 years old when this was happening. But from the perspective I had then and the perspective I had now, it was probably the only example of playing the race card that one worked and two was not a legitimate thing to do in the moment. Because the main thing understood about OJ Simpson today is the fact that OJ Simpson was pretty damn anti-Black. I used a clip about him in the Bamboozled video because OJ Simpson was one of the most notable figures to be like, I don't see myself as Black, I see myself as an American or some shit like that. The classic line from Jay-Z is, I'm not Black, I'm OJ, pregnant pause, okay.
The next table saying, look, there's OJ sitting with all those. And I remember in my naivete saying to OJ, that was terrible for you. No, wait, don't you understand? She knew that I wasn't Black. She saw me as OJ. And really, at that moment, I thought he was fucked.
And so him getting arrested and accused of murdering his wife, something that I think most people kind of understand and think he did. Like, it should have gotten the Jonathan Majors treatment from us, real talk. It really speaks to maybe a difference in attitudes that have changed over time. Because although there were plenty of Jonathan Majors defenders, and I think, I won't say rightfully so, but understandably so, considering all the things that Jonathan Majors represented for Black people, at least before his trial and kind of weird nonsense played out. OJ had been very intentional about not associating with Black people and Blackness pretty much as soon as his career in football was over and during his career in football. So in retrospect, and again, feel free to come drag me and let me know how wrong I am. But in retrospect, from what I perceived, OJ had not earned Black folks' support. He had not earned Black folks' trust and empathy for the situation he had got himself in. Yet, there we were. We were all in on having this man be innocent. Something that it did not seem he was. Like, again, I'm not thinking too hard or remembering too hard. I didn't stop and do any research into the case. I'll let some true crime people revisit that. I'm sure there'll be videos about it coming.
So one day later, after recording this, had a little more time to think, and specifically read an article by Michael Harriot, who's just a dope journalist that you should pay attention to on a regular basis and follow on Twitter, always dropping good takes. And he pointed out that this trial wasn't really us supporting OJ. It was us supporting Johnny Cochran, which I get to later in the video. Still some iffiness in like the full totality of, how this trial played out and, what that support looks like in retrospect. But it makes a lot more sense if you think about what Johnny Cochran was doing, which was exposing racist injustice, racism in the criminal justice system. It just so happened that OJ was the beneficiary of it, which is not ideal, but, it makes sense.
But everything I remember about the case sound like the nigga did the shit. And then he got Johnny Cochran, who became famous off of this case, off of this trial. And Johnny Cochran made most of this trial about race and racism. And that's kind of what made it so muddy, because Johnny Cochran was talking real shit about racism in America, and specifically in Los Angeles and LA County with the LAPD, which is still to this day one of the most racist, corrupt police precincts in the country. But then it was attaching it to OJ Simpson. And so I'm not saying it undermined the points that he was making, but it was like, it is and was a hard to figure out thing. This is coming after the Rodney King beating. This is coming after the Reagan era. So there's a lot of stress and animosity around race at the time. And Cochran tapped into that in terms of the public spectacle and used it to defend his client. And I don't know if that was what got OJ off. I don't, again, remember enough of the details about the case. I find it hard to believe that the race card is really what helped him here. From what I remember, it really just sounds like the LAPD botched the case. But he was acquitted. I'll never forget being in middle school in 7th grade, and they announced that he was acquitted. My fucking principals stopped school to announce that OJ Simpson was acquitted. And I was like, why? Oh, fuck, the 90s didn't make no damn sense. If you think that things are weird now, trust me, things have always been fucking weird. And I recall this was the one white teacher I had, and she looked pissed. She was pissed. And they have footage, play some footage here of how pissed white people were about OJ Simpson going free and how much black people were celebrating. And it was I'm gonna let y'all cook on that. I can't celebrate with this. The nigga definitely killed this motherfucker. But that's my perspective and my opinion, allegedly. But then there's the aftermath, which is also profound and weird, because this was the one moment where a black man got away with some shit. Be clear, a rich black man got away with some shit. OJ Simpson did not typify the typical reality of black men in the justice system. That needs to be said. But because he got away with it, he became a spectacle, a boogeyman for white people for the rest of his life. He was always getting media attention. He was always hounded. He was always treated like we treat, what's the little goofy white boy name that killed 2 people at the march? He was like a black Kyle Rittenhouse. So for years, he got sued in civil court and he lost. So that took a lot of his money, which put him into financial turmoil. Then he had to sell memorabilia and parts of his, football legacy. He went and got involved in some type of armed robbery, kidnapping situation that actually got him put in jail in the 2000s. I think he spent 5 years in prison for armed robbery or some shit. And then when he came out from that, suddenly he was black. After getting acquitted, he went right back to being OJ and not black, right? Like after he got acquitted, after all the support of the black people, he went right back to being a rich Negro. Shout out to Lil Bill. Lil Bill made a great video about how black men stop being black that you should watch to kind of get the unique psyche that happens when certain Negroes get a little money. But then after he lost all his money and he went to jail, he came back and then suddenly he was black and he was hanging out with like Uncle Luke and rappers and shit and dressing like a pimp, and it was just weird. And then he wrote a book called If I Did It. I think that was the name of the book. It was called If I Did It, or What If I Did Do It, or something wild like that. I never read it. The book actually never came out. It got a ton of hype. It would have been a bestseller and made him a lot of money. But, you know, enough white folks came together and said, nah, this is a bridge too far. And so it never came out. But he wrote a book.
One last correction. I found out right after recording this that the book did eventually come out. It was canceled upon its like announcement and like initial press that was going on around it. But at some point in time, the parents of, I believe, Ron Goldman, one of the victims of the murder, got the rights to the book and eventually released it sometime later. So just correcting that piece of misinformation.
Then there's this classic moment from one of his many expose news scenes where like, I'm gonna just play the clip. Just play the clip.
After we finished filming, OJ said to me that he had a surprise for me, and I genuinely was surprised. I think it was his idea of a joke, and this is it.
Yeah. And now he's dead. And then he disappeared, like after the weird pimp shit with Uncle Luke or whatever rapper he was hanging with. Maybe it was Snoop Dogg. It looks like he like did a whole black hip hop podcast scene. Cameron, Snoop Dogg. I don't know. I don't get it. I just know it was weird. It was weird. It's a weird thing. And now he's dead. And I don't have a lot to make of it. I don't have a lot of thoughts, but I will bring up again the fact that OJ was rich and the way that what happened with him is still kind of relevant with black folks and black celebrities today, in that we love a rich nigga, even if they don't love us. The anti-blackness inherent in what he did, the fact that he was not really for the people at any point in time, didn't matter in the face of the fact that he was popular and good at something and, you know, famous. And like there's some deep-rooted mess to, you know, with that. That's something that continues to happen to this day. We continue to celebrate raggedy folks just because they're really good at singing or they're really good at telling jokes or something else along those lines. And it'd be one thing if they really did contribute something significant or great to the culture. But like, again, with OJ, aside from being really good at football and like being entertaining in that regard, he was not about us at any point in time. Yet, folks still rode for him. And, you know, I'd like to think things are somewhat different today. I think they are a little bit, but not a ton, at least not from my perspective. But yeah, it feels like the end of an era. And I don't know what else to say about it. I'm FD Signifier, and this has been Light Work.